Hello, Tungsten Miner here. Today I'm starting a series of mod spotlights on Advanced Rocketry. So it's similar, if you've heard of it before, to Galacticraft, except it's got a bit more focus on realism and multi-block machines and a lot less on the zombies on Mars kind of aspect of things. There's a lot to this mod, so I'm going to get started with part one today, where I cover some of the basic machinery, and there's a lot of multi-block stuff to look at. And then in future episodes, I'll get into talking about what do you actually do with all this stuff. So let's get started. First of all, let's talk about some of the unique ores that this mod adds. First up here, we've got rutile ore, which you can smelt into titanium, although not in a regular furnace. We'll talk about that in a little while. We've got some iridium ore, which is one of the kind of more important end-gamey sort of ores that you'll need. Pretty hard to find, but you'll need some of this in order to get to the end of the mod. And then this is dilithium crystal, which of course, if you're a Star Trek fan, you'll recognize that name. This is what you will need to start getting to the really, really endgame stuff, the warp cores and space, travel to other planets and star systems and things. I am using this mod right now, and really all I know about it is in the context of the mod pack Ad Astra, which I put together not too long ago. So I have changed a few things around, and I'm going to be talking about things in the context of the Ad Astra mod pack. If you're not playing that mod pack, you may find that things are a little bit different. Different recipes, different places where the ores generate, stuff like that. But the basic mechanics will all be the same. So just a little caution before I jump into things too much. Okay, so these are the basic ores. It also uses tin and copper, which I haven't pictured here because a lot of other mods add those. And chances are, if you're playing in a mod pack, you'll find those from something else as well. So moving on. One of the things that you need pretty early on to build pretty much anything are plates of various kinds of metal, gold and iron and so forth. And there's no machine that you can build without plates that lets you make plates, except for this contraption. So what we're looking at here is a small plate presser. And we can look at the recipe here. Whoops, not that way, like this. So you just take a piston with some iron ingots, and that gets you a presser. And the presser then can be placed, oh bother, let's get rid of this stuff here. There we go. The presser can be placed facing upside down with an open space with an obsidian block underneath. And if you have this situation, you can then take a block of whatever kind of metal you're trying to turn into plates, drop it in between the obsidian and the presser, and then provide a redstone signal. And that will give you some plates. Now you notice I started off with a block of iron, 9 ingots, and I got 4 plates. Now if you're doing this in other mods, it's generally 1 ingot to 1 plate, so thermal expansion, railcraft, etc. This is not a great ratio, so you don't want to stick with this thing for very long. What we're going to do now is move on and look at some of the other options that we have. And let me get rid of some of this junk here. Okay. In order to do better, you're going to need to build your first multi-block machine. So in this box, I have a whole bunch of stuff that allows us to do that. The first thing you're going to want, though, is this Holoprojector. Which is a plate. So you have to build this other thing first if you don't have another mod that provides you with some way to build plates. Some optical sensors, and again, plates. And then this is just any kind of glass. It looks a little funny because we've got a lot of different kinds. But any sort of glass pane will be totally fine here. And glowstone, which of course means before you can really get into advanced rocketry too much, you're going to need to go to the nether. It turns out you're going to need a lot of glowstone, so while you're there, pick up a bunch. The way that this thing works, now that we have it, this Holoprojector, is you shift, right-click, and it brings up this interface where if you drag, not mouse wheel, I got confused by that for a while, you can see all of the different multi-block machines that this mod has available. So in this particular episode, I'm going to cover just a few of these that are the ones you need early on in the game. And in particular, I'm going to start with this rolling machine. So this is the thing that allows you to make plates. And it does so with a much, much more efficient one-to-one recipe rather than this 2-to-1 recipe. Multi-block machines take up multiple blocks, therefore they spread themselves over a wide area. I've given myself this little marker to make sure that I can put this in the place I want. So having right-clicked with this thing in my hand, it's created all of these phantom blocks. And I can walk through them, they're not real blocks, but we can see that it's shifting through a lot of different options. And each of these are the different options that each thing can have in that position. So you can see as I'm focusing on this one block, it's not changing, which means there's only one option for this particular position on this specific machine. Same thing here. But we can see as I focus on this one, it's alternating back and forth between a couple of different choices. Now, it's not any old block, it's only these few. So I really don't have an infinite number of choices. And you can see in this particular machine, really it's only these 3 that are nearest to us now that are shifting, plus this one back here. So let me stop and talk for a moment about coils. There are a bunch of different kinds of coils. And on pretty much every machine, you can use any one of the coils that you want. So copper, gold, titanium, aluminum, and iridium. The different coils make the machines work more efficiently or faster. Depends on which kind of machine. They have different effects. So copper is the lowest kind, and you kind of work your way up to iridium being the highest kind. And as you use more and more expensive coils, you wind up getting better and better machines. Now, fortunately, being multi-block machines, you can start off with a lower quality coil and then work your way up. So I'm going to start off by doing just that. I've got some copper coils here, and I'm going to build the machine at first with just copper coils. Creative power input, regular power input. Being that this is a mod spotlight, I'm just going to make things easy on myself, go with creative power input. I'm going to need a fluid input hatch, and toss that right there. I'm going to need a machine structure block, toss that right there. I'm going to need an output hatch and an input hatch. So output, output, and machine structure, machine structure. Let me grab those, toss those in, another machine structure. And again, with the motors, machines go faster when they have more powerful motors. So here I have a regular motor, and here I have an elite motor. And the elite motor, you notice, says it has a machine speed of 4 as compared to 1. So there's a whole bunch of different motors that have a different set of grades. Now, the recipes in the Add Astra mod pack, which I'm using as I record this, have different recipes. So I'm not going to show you the recipes. They'll be different for you if you're not using this mod pack. But suffice to say, the recipes for elite motors are going to be far more expensive than the recipes for regular motors. But I'm going to start off with this regular motor, and then later on, I'll show you how to change it. Okay, so I built everything, right? We should have a multi-block machine. Everything's good. Well, no. Most of the multi-block machines are more than 1 layer tall, and the hollow imager only shows you the first layer by default. So what I can do is hold down Shift and then roll my mouse wheel down, and it goes up by 1 layer. If I roll it down again, it shows me the whole machine. But of course, I've already filled in the bottom layer, so that doesn't change anything. And if I roll it again, it's going to show me just the bottom layer, which of course I have just filled in, so I can't see anything there either. And then up again to get the second layer. So just by rolling your mouse wheel, you'll shift between seeing the whole machine and just 1 layer at a time. The way that I have found most convenient to work with these is to start by just having the bottom layer roll the mouse wheel 1 tick towards me so that I see the next layer, fill that in, and then 1 tick again and see the next layer and keep working my way up. As we look down the line, we can see there's some multi-block machines that are much taller than just 2 layers. So this actually becomes pretty relevant. So we can fill that in. Now, one thing to notice, as I hover over this thing, you'll see that it's acting like a real block, except I can walk through it. The useful thing about this is that notice I'm only on the phantom block. There's no other block that I'm touching. And I right click and it fills in the block. So I don't have to place it like on top of some other block. I can just like throw it right onto that block itself. Grab the rolling machine, toss that there. Notice orientation doesn't really matter. I need an input hatch and another input hatch. So we should be done, right? Well, it doesn't form the multi-block machine until you click on the named block. So I'm making a rolling machine. There's a block, a single block called the rolling machine, which is the thing that figures out, is this all set up correctly? So as I right click on this, it says, nope, I lied. It does matter what orientation these things are in. So you'll have to pay attention to that as you're going along. So let me just fix that and throw that in there. I'm going to shift, click, boom. There we go. So now I fixed the orientation on that one block and everything else has worked. You'll notice that red X shows up whenever there's something wrong, and it puts it on the block that's wrong. Now, that's not always easy to see exactly where that block that went wrong is, but at least it's some kind of clue. Okay, so we now have a rolling machine. I can click on this thing. This interface doesn't really do much, but one thing I want to point out is speed and power are both at 1x. That's largely because we used these copper coils and we used the regular motor. If we used something more sophisticated, then we'd get a better result. So I'm going to break these blocks, and you notice the machine immediately becomes not a multi-block machine anymore. I'm going to grab myself my more advanced materials and toss those in there. And now we're going to come back around and just click on that same block again, and it converts it. And now we look, speed is 16x and power is 1x. So in this particular case, it looks like the coils don't matter. Oh no, the coils make it faster and the motor makes it faster. So that's what's going on with this one. There's an on-off switch so that you can just stop it running no matter what. Here are our input hatches, so we can toss things in there. So like this iron ingot, for example. And I can now say go. And it's not running. Well, it's not running because this machine also requires water, this H2O barrel here. So I'm going to grab a fluid duct, and I'm going to grab a tank, and I'm going to grab a wrench and just dump the water into that tank. Now we can see this fluid hatch is filling up, and that flash that just went by, that was that iron plate. Let me grab another chunk of iron so we can watch this a little more carefully. Okay, so I'm going to stand here, click on that input hatch, and as I toss this in here, we'll see it zips right through. That was so fast because we've replaced all of these things with much more advanced pieces. So just so that we can actually see this thing happening, because all of these machines are animated. We can see it's just zipping right through. Of course, this is a 16 times machine. We've used some pretty expensive materials to build this thing. If you built this out of the regular motor and copper coils, it would go a lot more slowly. What's happening, though, is all of this stuff is now accumulating in this output hatch. So you notice this machine has two out of them. That's so that it can overflow into the second one. Certain items will take many input materials, or few input materials, and produce many output materials, and multiply the number of things that you have. You can also build things like tanks, which don't stack. So you can wind up with a lot of things, and it will wind up using all of these spaces. So that is the rolling machine. It basically is for taking anything that is not flat and making it flat. You can also take your plates. Let's grab these guys here. And we can actually run them through again. And that's going to produce an iron sheet. And I think we can take an iron sheet. Actually, I think we need 2 iron sheets. Let's do this. And they've already zipped right through, and they've become a low-pressure tank. So sometimes you'll take the same materials and you'll run them through multiple times in order to get the recipes you need. If you're using JEI or something else, you can look up all those things. There is an extension for JEI which allows you to get the recipes for all of these machines in JEI as well. Okay, moving on. Next up is the lathe. So I've already built all the rest of the multi-block machines. I think you get the idea of how these things work. Little visual defect there. So I'm not going to make you sit through watching me build all the rest of these machines. The lathe is for making ingots into rods. That's what they're called. Different mods call them different things. And you'll notice this recipe gives you 3 to 4. So there's not quite as useful as a recipe. Whereas if we take these things here and we stick them in the input hatch up here, just one of them, and again, I've gone ahead and used all the most expensive stuff, so mine is going to go really fast by comparison to what you'd see. It's a 2-to-1 ratio, so building this machine gives you a much better use of your materials. It's more efficient in the use of your materials, which matters because between plates and rods, you're going to use a lot of both of these items as you get into the mod. So if you build these 2 machines early, it will be very much worthwhile for you to do this. If you wait a while and build them later, well, you'll have lost a lot of the potential value because you'll been using the less efficient recipes for a while, right? So the smasher version of making plates and the crafting table version of making rods. So yeah, I highly recommend building these things early because you're going to use those materials quite a lot. Okay, so let's clear out my inventory here and move on to the next machine. The last 4 machines that I'm going to cover today all have to do with making circuits in one way or another. This one's the only semi-exception. This is the electric arc furnace. It uses a lot of power. It takes a very long time, and as you can see, it is quite large. The 3 recipes that are most relevant for this guy are to do with turning sand into silicon, which you'll need a lot of for making circuits and things, for turning iron and coal into steel, which you will need a lot of, so it's best to get this going straight away. And then finally, for smelting your rutile ore. Titanium is too tough for a regular smelter, at least in the opinion of this mod maker, so you need to put it through an electric arc furnace to be able to get the metal out of it again. If you're running other mods, and in particular, if you're working in Astra, then you'll find that making steel can be done a lot more easily using thermal expansion, which its induction smelter will make you steel. However, you may not have that mod. If you have Railcraft, that has a way of making steel. There's a bunch of other mods which also provide ways of making steel. So probably you're going to find that this is not your best way of making steel if you have other choices. However, if you're just running Advanced Rocketry, this is what you got, and you're going to need a lot of steel. So you might even want to make a couple of these things. The other recipe, which kind of matters, and this is the one I'm going to focus on from here forward, is turning sand into silicon. So over here, I've already had it make a silicon ingot. This took something like, I want to say 800 seconds. I could be off on the number exactly. A long, long time to make one silicon ingot. And you're going to need a lot of them. So again, it's the kind of thing where you want to set it up fairly early on and just let it go while you're working on other things, because it's going to take a while. Once you have a silicon ingot, there's a bunch of things you can do with it, but you're probably going to want to make a bunch of circuits. And the way to do that is to get yourself some silicon wafers. Well, in order to do that, you need to start with a silicon boule. So here I've got a silicon ingot and a silicon nugget in the input hatch. And when I turn this thing on, you can see it fills up these crystal chambers and then makes one silicon boule as the output. And it's pretty fast. And of course, I've used all the best materials so that this thing's even faster than it should be. You then take your silicon boule and you drop it in the input hatch of your cutting machine and turn on the cutting machine, and it's going to go through and it's going to chop this thing and drop it in here. Now, silicon wafers get used in a whole lot of different materials. So in particular, your precision assembler is going to use this to make a bunch of different things. You're going to use a lot of these basic circuit plates. So you're going to get used to using this recipe. And in fact, why don't we just head over here and finish off this last machine before we talk about that? Getting ahead of myself here. The precision assembler is basically like a mini clean room for making circuit parts. So here I've got a copper plate, steel plate, and redstone. And when I turn this guy on, oh, I built this out of such advanced materials, it just zipped through so fast you couldn't even see what it did. Well, suffice to say, the thing shows up on this little plate. The little plate animates along, gets stamped by this thing, animates along, gets poked by this thing, animates along, gets, I don't know, infrared light shine on it. The little arm comes down. And then finally, the whole thing winds up in your output hatch over here. So this is a control circuit board, and this is another thing that you use a lot of. There are 2 recipes for this kind of thing, and this is another thing that this mod does quite a lot is there'll be a cheap recipe that uses an expensive machine, and there'll be an expensive recipe which uses a cheap machine, in this case just a crafting table. So we've got iron plate, 4 pieces of copper, some wood, a diamond, redstone, 2 redstones, or you can use steel, copper, 1 ingot, and redstone, and you'll get the same thing. Way cheaper. Of course, you got to build this expensive machine to get that. So you decide for yourself what's the right recipe. What I found worked best for me was to only do this until I had built enough of these parts to make all of the parts for the precision assembling machine. So I decided to go ahead and build all of these machines pretty early on. And that way I saved myself a ton of expensive materials down the road. But it is an investment, right? There's a lot of blocks in these things, and none of them are super cheap to make. So you'll find what the recipes are in JEI or something similar. But that gets us through all of the basic machines for advanced rocketry. So we start off with a little review of our ores. In addition to copper and tin, it adds some special ores, our rutile ore, which turns into titanium, iridium, which gets used in our very high-end expensive machines, and dilithium, which powers our spaceships and allows us to make some really advanced stuff. To start the game off, you're probably going to make this small presser to get yourself some plates, but you'll want to upgrade to the rolling machine pretty early on to get the plates a lot more cheaply. Same deal here. You can make your rods on a crafting table, but you're probably going to want to do that on a lathe because it's a lot cheaper. This is the first machine that you kind of need to make the thing at all. There's no cheaper way of doing it. And in particular, I'm talking about silicon, for one, and steel if you happen not to have another mod which makes it. In order then to move this raw silicon along into a useful form, you need your crystallizer to make silicon boules, your cutting machine to turn those into wafers, and then your precision assembler to turn those into your various kinds of circuit boards. So that allows you to make pretty much all of the materials, the raw materials, the basic stuff that you're going to need for all of the rest of the advanced rocketry stuff. So that's it for today. I will be back in a little while with another part where we will get into some of the uses of all of the things that this stuff can make. That's it for now. Talk to you later.